Hey everyone, it's Browne here from Monuments. I'm going to be taking you through my new live rig, which consists of the new Line 6 Helix unit. This will eventually be the rack unit as opposed to the floor. I've got a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier through an oversized 4x12. 3 pedals here. They are the Boss NS2, the Pandemonium John Browne signature pedal from Reaper Pedals, and then an MXR EQ pedal, which is powered by a T-Rex fuel tank Chameleon. Yeah, I'm just going to run you through quickly what's going on in the signal chain, and then I'll take you through some sounds and how I've constructed them. So obviously the start of the signal starts with my Mayones guitars, which at the moment I have the 8-string Regius with bare knuckle pickups in it. This will go directly into the input of the Helix. From here I have a loop with the pedals in, which just so happens to be loop 1. I'm running the Helix direct out through XLR. I'm running the 1/4 inch out of the Helix directly into the Mesa Boogie dual rectifier, which is currently under the camera, which then goes into this oversized 4x12. And to control the amp channels, I'm using the external amp control that is on the Helix. It's like a relay switcher to switch to channels 2 and 3. And with the new multi-watt heads, channel 1 is neutral, so if you've not got any relays, only got 2 relays, and you can switch to all 3 channels. And in this instance, I use my clean channel as a mute channel because all my clean sounds will go through the Helix directly to the front of house. So yeah, that's the signal chain. It's really simple, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how I construct sounds for each song and how I'm doing it. So without further ado, here you go. So I've put the camera in quite an awkward place, but it's the only way that you guys are going to be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to start off with actually something that I've named Rhythm Channel 2. And as you can see here, it's going to the 1/4 inch output. I've got a send going through to my pedals, and then a return coming back. It's that simple. And then if I show you the command center that I have here, then I have an external amp command with number 1 being the tip, which changes the channel to channel 2. So that's a relatively simple patch, and then that comes through to my dual rectifier for a slightly less gainy sound, more of a rock kind of distortion kind of thing. On my second patch, I've got the same thing going on, except this time it's going to channel 3. So if we go to the command center here, you can see that now I'm using the ring side of the external amp switcher, which changes it to channel 3. A very, very, very simple and easy way to program your patch changes if you have an amp that has relay switches as opposed to like a custom DIN jack or something like that. So the first patch I created for my new live sound was one for a song called Blue Sky Thinking, which hopefully some of you will know. It's on our first album, Gnosis. If I just play a little bit so you can hear what's going on. As you can hear, there's quite a lot of effects going on, and I tried to recreate it as close to the Pod XT sound that I had. Unfortunately, the Helix doesn't have a piezo or piezo acoustic model yet, so I had to play around with quite a few different amps and a few custom IRs, but I eventually found something that I really liked. So if we start at the start of the patch so I can show you what's going on. So I started with a compressor, the LA Studio Comp, which is based off an LA2A, which is similar to what's in the Pod XT model. And it's reducing the sound quite a bit because I like I guess it's quite an undynamic clean sound in terms of when I'm picking each individual note. Because we have a lot of clean sounds going on underneath distorted patches, I need it quite harshly compressed or limited in order to cut through the mix. So I will compress it to begin with before the amp. And then here I have a US double normal channel, which I think is based off some sort of Fender. I'm going to guess that it's probably a Fender Twin, based on the name. As you can see, I run the drive pretty high, but it still remains clean. It's the verging on breaking up. If we go to this as well, you can see that I haven't really changed much as far as the sag or the hum is concerned. But I roll the treble down and boost the mids and the bass a little bit, so it's a little bit more full as opposed to trebly. Next in the chain, I have a 10-band graphic EQ, so I can just boost and cut some frequencies. As you can see here, I've cut the really low lows, which you don't really need for guitar anyway, even if you're using an 8-string, as that kind of interferes with bass and kick drum and all those things. So I've cut a little bit of 2K to get rid of the pick attack, and a little bit of the top end as well. Again, like 16 kilohertz, you're not really going to hear on guitar, or you're not going to want it. I mean, if you think about most guitar speakers, they roll off from about 5 to 15K, kind of like a ribbon mic. So try and think about that sort of thing when you're programming your patches. So you can follow the guideline of what a guitar is meant to sound like in the analog world. So then if we go to the next patch, I've got a dual cab setup here. I'm using a 1x12 with a 4038 ribbon mic, which is based off of Cole's 4038. I've got a distance of 2 inches. Haven't done any of the low or the high cut in this particular instance, which is weird for me because I normally do, especially with my distorted patches. And then cab 2, again 2 inches away, but this time I've used a 7 dynamic, which is probably based off an SM7B. Again, not really much going on there apart from the distance, no low cut, no high cut, as it just seemed to work in this particular instance. So next up, we've got a very, very slow chorus. Not very much depth. It's mainly just to sort of fill out the sound just a little bit without being crazy. So hopefully you can hear that little bit of chorus in there. And from here, I've gone to split the signal. And at the top, it's going into a delay, a dual delay. And in the bottom here, it's going towards a cave kind of reverb. And the reason that I've split this as well is so that there's a little bit more clarity between the two effects of delay and reverb. When you run a delay into a reverb, it's obviously going to sound great for certain patches, and it's going to create this bigness because each delay is going to go into the reverb and create more reverb. But in this instance, it worked better with the reverb outside of the chain running in parallel to the delay. So as far as delay goes, I've got a half-time delay, and this patch is set up to be at the tempo that the song's at, which is 135 beats per minute. As you can see, it is just the same thing on both sides in stereo, so it's half-time delay, 70% feedback. The mix is identical as well. But if you look what I've done here, I've cut the high cut down to 3.6 kilohertz and the low cut up to 80. So I kind of wanted that lo-fi kind of analog delay, and this was what I found to be the best way to create it. So then the main line will cut through, being the most clear in the mix. I've also turned off the depth and the speed of the mod. Basically, the mod mode's completely off in this instance. I've already got chorus on there, and a spread as far as possible, so it's as wide as possible. Okay, so now if we go down to the reverb, I've got a carnivorous delay, cave reverb, sorry. The decay is pretty high. The pre-delay is also pretty high up. It's so that the reverb doesn't come in straight away. As you can see here, I've got a low cut up to just below 60 hertz, 59 hertz, and a high cut of 9.4 kilohertz. And the reason for that is I didn't really want the really, really top end of the guitar feeding into the reverb because it made it a little bit messy. So and just try and remember those things when you're adding effects, because that can really clear up the sound a lot when you're adding so much reverb and so much delay. Just trying to like filter the point at which the delay is going to be at and which the reverb is going to be at and what part of the guitar sound it's actually going to affect. The mix is pretty high at 64%. So yeah, and then this will go to 2 more effects here. I've got another compressor here, which is also compressing it pretty heavily, and it just brings everything together. And the reason for that is it's something that the Pod XT used to do. It used to really compress everything together in a really nice way, and I wasn't able to create that with just the one compressor. So this time I tried to do it with 2. So yeah, as you can see, it's pretty standard. There's no emphasis on the comp. It's literally just compressing it at about 50%. And it just brings the reverb together with the guitar a little bit more. And then at the end here, I've just cut out some frequencies that I could hear that I didn't like. So 2 kilohertz again, I've cut that by 8 decibels, which is quite a lot, to be honest. The low frequency of 250 just by 20 dB. As you can see beforehand, I actually boosted that frequency, but once you added the reverb in, it just made the reverb a little bit messy, so we've just cut it again. So then you get the thickness of the sound going into the reverb and then just cutting it a little bit, so at least it's still quite a full sound. The high frequency of 2.8, I decided to take that, put that back in, sorry. And then I've done a high cut of 10 kilohertz. As that is where my ears seemed to think that it sounded good, so. Even though this unit is a full spectrum unit of the human hearing of 20 hertz up to 20 kilohertz, that is not what the frequency of the guitar is. It's actually quite a mid-focused instrument. So when you're programming patches, try and think about that and how you can filter certain things out to create a space for the particular instrument, whether that be guitar, bass, you know, and if you're in a mixing environment, always try and think about that as well, as that will really clear up the mix. I'm going to show you how to create a distorted patch. Right now, unfortunately, my battery on my GoPro has died, and I'm running out of time because the light from outside is becoming dark. So I'm gonna do this with the camera where it is now, and I'll move it so you can see what's going on the screen. So without further ado, I'll show you what I've got up here. So if you look, I've got a brand new preset. Let's go from the start. Standard 10-band graphic EQ. Not really too much going on. I've boosted the level and cut some of the lower mids and the lows. As I'm using 7-string and 8-string guitars mostly for monuments, I tend to try and EQ the guitar a little bit before I go into an amp. Just to cut, you know, that low end fart that you get with the 7th and 8th strings. So yeah, that's really, really simple. I normally do that with a pedal, but as I wanted to keep this completely inside the box for this, this is kind of what I would normally do. So if we go to the next one, we have a Compulsive Drive, which is based off an OCD pedal. As you can see, it's doing mostly a clean boost kind of thing. The gain's pretty low. The tone's just over half to create a little bit more top end. The peak time would be on lo-fi if it was on the pedal as opposed to the hi-fi setting. For this particular one, I've used version 4 as opposed to version 2. It just sounded better for this particular amp that I'm using. And I've boosted the level a little bit as well so we can get a little bit more drive out of the amp without having to use too much gain. And then I have a noise gate. Not really doing anything too wacky and out of the ordinary. And then I'm using the PV Panama model, which is obviously based off of 5150. I've set all the controls to 6, including the resonance, because that seems to be the place where a 5150 sounds good. So we've started with that. And then on the cab mod, I've got 2 cabs, both 1960-75 speakers. And on the first cab, I'm using a 57, a distance of 1 inch. No high cut, no low cut at the moment. And then on the second cab, which is currently turned off, I've got a 421 dynamic through the 1960 cab as well. As some of you will know, that's pretty much the standard formula for metal guitar sounds. So we're going to try that and see what happens, basically. So without further ado, I'm going to just play around with some sounds and let you know what I'm doing as I go along. So I'm going to start by playing with the 57 through the 1960-75 cab, and I'm going to play around with the low cut and the high cut a little bit, the distance of the mic as well, and obviously then go from there basically, and also play around with some of the EQ settings on the amp, yada yada. For this particular one, I'm also using my 8-string Mayones again with bare knuckle pickups, and yeah, here we go. So far what I've done is I've just played around with the controls a little bit so it sounds good with what cab we're using at the moment. So I've boosted the top end, the presence and the treble by a little bit. The presence is currently at 6.8 and the presence is at 7.5 just to make it cut a little bit more. And that sounds pretty good to my ears at the moment. So now I'm going to go to the cab module and I'm going to play around with the high cut so it cuts a little bit of that nasty top end out. So I'm going to cut that down to start with to 15 kilohertz. Which has already cut out quite a lot of the necessarily evil that's at the top there. I'm going to try 14.5 now. I'm going to play around with the distance of the mic now. I'm going to try 1.5. As you can tell when you're moving the distance around, it almost interferes with how aggressive and in your face it is. Obviously the 1 inch being the most in your face. But in this particular instance, I like the 1.5 and the 2 inches away. Yeah, the 1.5 inch away just seems to tame that really, really high top end. So we're going to stick with that for this mic. I'm also going to play around with the low cut now. I'm going to start around about 60 and then move up from there, basically. So we're at 60 hertz right now. So I played around with it just for a couple of seconds then, and I find that 80 hertz is a pretty good medium between keeping the bottom end there and also retaining a little bit more clarity and leaving some space for the bass guitar. So now I'm going to try working with the 421 mic by itself. So I'm just going to turn off the level of the 1960-75 with the 57, and I'm going to move to the same cab with the 421 on it. So listening back to the tone we just had, it was quite full, but it was lacking a little bit of like cutty mids to my ear. So I'm going to try and recreate that with this one. So let's see what we've got. As you can see, it's a completely different sound. It's not got the aggressiveness that the 57 had. But we're going to just turn this so the distance is 1.5 inches away from the speaker again. I'm going to have a little play around with the low cut and the high cut again to see what we can get. Okay, I had a little play around then. This sounds pretty good to my ears as well. It's again, the low cut is at 80 hertz and the high cut is at 14 kilohertz. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and blend those together and see if we can create the thing that I thought was missing from the original 57. So I'm going to put the 57 as the main mic at 0 dB on the level. And then I'm going to bring the 421 in to see what that sounds like. So it's reducing the volume of the 421 now. Okay. Okay, we're currently about minus 8 decibels on the 421 mic, but even though it's helped towards the fullness, it's created like a little node around the lows and the low mids. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add an EQ to that to try and cut that out. So I'm going to use the parametric EQ and try and find the frequency that's bothering me with the low frequency one. I'm going to put the low Q as sharp as possible and then just turn the low gain up all the way and then just filter through until I find the frequency. Seem to have found it. It's between 230 and 280, so I'm gonna go in between there at about 250 or 260, and I'm gonna cut the low gain by a couple of dB and see if we can make that sound a little bit better. So I'm gonna start with a minus 1 dB, the low Q at about 3, so it's not too wide, not too narrow. We just turn that on and off so we can hear what it's doing. As you can see, that's actually doing too much to the sound, so I'm going to do that by minus 0.5. I'm going to try even just putting it back to 0 to see what's going on. Interesting, this EQ is ever so slightly quieter. So let's get the volumes exactly the same so it doesn't trick our ears. So I've done a plus 1 dB on the level now on the EQ. Still a little bit too quiet, so let's point that by 0.5. funny. Even just having the EQ with nothing going on just seems to tame the high end, which you'll find sometimes by adding things in the chain. It can actually do that. You'll find that with analog gear as well. So if we just bypass it quickly so you can hear it. And then turn the EQ on. There's nothing going on with this EQ right now. See how it's just sorted out the real top end? It's almost like helped it be not as harsh. There's the low frequency that's bothering me is still there, so I'm going to try minusing it by 0.3 of a dB. Okay, that's sounding pretty good to my ears right now. It doesn't feel very together at the moment, so I'm actually going to try just literally just touching it with an LA Studio compressor. So let's make sure that we get the volume the same again. So, turn the gain all the way down and make sure that the gain is exactly the same so our ears aren't tricked to begin with. There we go. So now I'm going to try peak reducing it just by half and seeing what happens. So I'm going to try peak reducing it by up to 1. And it's ever so slightly loud, so I'm just going to turn down the gain to 3.5. I'm just going to turn the gain up a tiny little bit to 3.8.